Two men are behind bars and are accused of killing a 22-year-old man in Chicago's Douglas Park neighborhood. 21-year-old Moses Maldonado and 22-year-old Nicholas Samudio, both of Chicago, Illinois, are behind bars in connection to the killing of 22-year-old Thomas Villa. At 2:15 a.m. on Sunday the 25th of February, Thomas was found fatally shot in the head and chest in the 2700 block of West 18th Street. Police say he was discovered between two vehicles on the road. The two suspects were arrested later that evening at 6:23 p.m. in the 2700 block of South Holman Avenue. When officers found them, they were in possession of a car that had been stolen in January. Moses and Nicholas are charged with first-degree murder, resisting obstructing police, and theft of a vehicle. They're due for a bond hearing this week. No additional information is available at this time. An Atmore, Alabama man is behind bars after his 2-year-old son died after being left in his hot car for hours. At around 4:30 p.m. on Monday the 27th of February, 51-year-old Sean Roosevelt went to collect his son from daycare, but is told his child had not been dropped off that day. The father then discovered his unresponsive son in the backseat of his vehicle. The outdoor temperature on the day was almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Sean had spent most of the day working at his downtown ice cream shop while he forgot to drop the toddler off at the daycare in the morning. He rushed the boy to the Atmore Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Sean is charged with reckless murder, which is defined as the death of another person by acting with extreme indifference to human life and recklessly engaging in conduct which creates a grave risk of death to a person. Sean is held at the Escambia County Jail on a $500,000 bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 72-year-old Paul Stevens Ittle of Ocala, Florida, is behind bars after investigators found printed images of child porn that weighed more than a ton. In January of 2023, detectives were alerted to child sexual abuse material being uploaded to the internet from an address in Ocala. Police said they tracked the uploads to Paul's IP address. On the 23rd of February, deputies executed a search warrant at his residence, located in the 4200 block of Southeast 46th Street. They found more than 220,000 printed photographs of child sexual abuse material, arranged in large stacks and boxes in his bedroom and office. A print on Paul's desk shows signs of heavy use. The printed items, which weighed about 2,600 pounds, a computer and digital storage device, were removed from the residence. During the raid, other residents told police that Paul would not allow them in his office or bedroom without personally escorting them. Paul was arrested and charged with 25 counts of child porn possession. He's held at the Marion County Jail, where he remains on a $250,000 bond. A Houston, Texas woman was sentenced to 40 years in prison this week in exchange for pleading guilty to killing her 2 children in 2018 and burying them under a neighbor's house. On the 28th of February, the Harris County District Attorney's Office announced that 37-year-old Shabora Latrice Thomas pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder for the death of 5-year-old Kiana Thomas and 7-year-old Araylin Thomas. On the 12th of August 2016, Shabora drowned Kiana in the bathtub at the home on the 3000 block of Tia Wester Street. After killing Kiana, Shabora made Araylin come to the bathroom, where she also drowned him. After their deaths, Shabora left their bodies in a trash can behind their house. She then left for work at Little Cajun Kitchen, Texas, and attempted to collect a $47 paycheck 2 days early, which was declined. Unable to leave town, she tried to dig a hole for the bodies, but when she couldn't dig a hole large enough, she rolled the bodies under a neighbor's house. She started packing up her house and throwing things away. She told a friend that she drowned her children and left their bodies under a neighbor's house, but the friend thought she was joking. When the friend realized it was not a joke, he asked more questions and she showed him where the bodies could be found. He then called Houston police and Shabora was arrested. District Attorney Kim Ogg said in a statement that Shabora cannot appeal her conviction or sentence due to her plea. She wrote that this mother knew what she was doing. She knew it was wrong, and we vowed to seek justice for these 2 children. Shabora's husband and kid's father was reportedly shot and killed by Harris County deputies in March of 2018. A 42-year-old Albuquerque, New Mexico man will spend the rest of his life behind bars for fatally strangling his 27-year-old fiancée and raping her after her death. On Wednesday the 1st of March, Jeremiah Lopez was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 15 years for first-degree murder, false imprisonment, and 3 counts of criminal sexual penetration after being convicted of the charges in June of 2022. On the morning of the 15th of January 2019, Jeremiah fatally strangled Krishna Perez in their home in the 420 block of Baton Drive Southwest because he discovered risque selfies on her iPad and believed she sent them to another man. Prosecutors argued that Krishna never sent the explicit photos to anyone. After finding the photos, Jeremiah began to argue with Krishna, which led him to straddling her on the bed as she struggled to free herself before they fell onto the floor. Jeremiah then wrapped his arm around her neck for a minute or longer until she was no longer breathing. Jeremiah then ravaged her corpse and stabbed himself before calling 911 at around 7 a.m. and confessed to the strangling. He told jurors, "I'm ashamed to say it, but I had sex with her naturally, and after that went and got a knife and I slit my wrists." He added that when I didn't feel like I was going to die, I had sex with her again, and then I stabbed myself in the throat. 36-year-old Domenico Gigante is behind bars for allegedly fatally shooting his 15-year-old daughter, her mother, her grandmother, and another man who was the father of 2 young children who were also at the home. The incident occurred at around 1 a.m. on the 1st of March at 4075 Ellen Shepherd Avenue in Cocoa, Florida. A young child inside the home FaceTimed a family friend and told him about the shooting. That person stayed on the video chat with the child until he arrived at the home and called 911 at approximately 1:55 a.m. Deputies arrived at the scene and found 3 females and 1 male deceased inside the residence. The victims have been identified as 63-year-old Glenda Terrilliger, 35-year-old Constance Terrilliger, 36-year-old Michael Watson, and 15-year-old Kiara Terrilliger. 2 boys, aged 6 and 9, were also in the home at the time of the killings, and they were unharmed. The surviving children phoned a family friend, who rushed over to the home. Glenda and Kiara were both shot in their bedrooms, while Constance and Michael died next to each other on the living room floor. Detectives were able to determine that Domenico was the gunman. He had a previous relationship with Constance, and is the father of Kiara. Investigators said that Domenico left his home in Rockledge shortly after midnight and drove to the Cocoa residence about 8 miles away, where he broke into the home and shot the victims. Domenico then left the residence and returned home. Brevard County deputies went to Domenico's property and found him throwing items into the trash can. Domenico was arrested on 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. Investigators said that Domenico had been trying to reconnect with his daughter. However, his daughter had refused to have a relationship with him. Domenico allegedly told his roommate that he shot his daughter 3 times, and a few hours before the shooting, expressed his frustrations regarding his situation with his biological daughter and her family. The roommate said that Domenico told him, "I guess I'm going to go over and kill them all." Authorities have described Domenico as an extremely violent individual with an extremely violent past. Domenico has previously been arrested for domestic violence and battery in 2005, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault in 2012. He was also previously arrested on several counts of animal cruelty in 2008, after he killed a dog by slamming its head onto a table and breaking its neck and stabbed another dog. He's been held at the Brevard County Jail without bond. 31-year-old Richard Oswelski has recently been found guilty of beating his infant daughter to death. On the 11th of January 2020, authorities responded to Hendricks Regional Health in Danville, Indiana on a report of a 4-month-old girl who was brought into ER displaying signs of a head injury. The victim's parents told medical staff their daughter had shortness of breath and was shivering. Her child had bruising in various parts of her body, including a calf and around her belly button and eyes. Her child was transported to Raleigh Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, where she died a week later. The Marion County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the child died of blunt force trauma to the head and spine. The child's mother told investigators that on the 11th of January, Richard was home all day with their baby. When the mother returned home, she noticed bruising around the daughter's eyes, and she thought it looked like she'd been punched in the face. Richard told investigators that he was home alone with the baby, but he denied hurting his daughter. Richard, however, was booked into the Hendricks County Jail on the 10th of March 2021, over a year after his daughter's death. On the 1st of March, Richard was found guilty of aggravated battery resulting in bodily injury, and neglect of a dependent causing death. Richard will be sentenced on the 23rd of March. His charges come with a minimum sentence of 20 years in prison. The Selma Police Department in Alabama is investigating a homicide that happened on Thursday morning. At around 8:30 a.m. on the 2nd of March, authorities responded to a report of shots fired in the area of Division Street and Dexter Avenue. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a silver Chevrolet near the intersection with an unresponsive man in the driver's seat with gunshot wounds. Paramedics were called to the scene, however he was unable to be saved. The victim was pronounced dead at the scene by the Dallas County coroner, and he was identified as 20-year-old Quintarius Perkins, who lived nearby. Police Chief Kenta Fulford said that Quintarius appeared to have been shot while driving down Division Street before crashing into a utility pole. No further details have been released at this time, and the case remains under investigation. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania police is investigating a shooting that left a man dead on Wednesday in the city's Arlington Heights neighborhood. At about 5:45 p.m. on the 1st of March, officers responded to ShopSpotter alert for 10 rounds of gunfire at 3144 Cordell Place. When they arrived, they found an unresponsive man with multiple gunshot wounds lying on the ground in a courtyard. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office identified the victim as 35-year-old Tamont Terrell Williams Brown of Pittsburgh. Detectives recovered a gun nearby, and the city's mobile crime unit processed the scene. The motive behind the shooting is unclear, and the police have not released information on a suspect. The New York Police Department is investigating the robbery of 2 delis and the fatal shooting of a man. At around 11:30 p.m. on Friday the 3rd of March, the gunman entered the Delaware Gourmet Deli and Grocery Store at 201 East 81st Street in Manhattan, demanding cash before shooting a 67-year-old worker in the head. The suspect then fled the scene on a scooter and headed southbound on 3rd Avenue. The victim was declared dead at the scene. 30 minutes later, the suspect turned up in the Bronx and entered the Yaya Deli and Grill store at 851 Melrose Avenue. The suspect held the worker at gunpoint before taking off with an undisclosed amount of cash. Police believe both cases are connected, as the suspect was wearing a white hazmat suit and a black mask during each incident. No arrests have been made, and the investigation is ongoing. A Spring, Texas woman is behind bars after leaving her 2 children home alone. At around 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 28th of February, Harris County deputies responded to the 19,700 block of Enchanted Oats Drive on a report of a 4-year-old wandering around the streets alone. When deputies arrived, they found the child in the middle of the road crying and only wearing a t-shirt and underwear. They found the child's home, but there was no adult present. As the deputies made their way into the home, they found a 1-year-old child laying in bed with soiled linen. The child was covered in urine and laying in feces. The inside of the house was disheveled, filthy, and the children had no food. Eventually, the children's mother, 30-year-old Aisha Brown, arrived at the home and told investigators that she left her 2 children alone for about 10 minutes to run errands. She was arrested and charged with 2 counts of child abandonment with intent to return. She's held at the Harris County Jail with a bond set at $20,000. The children were taken to a local hospital for evaluation and are in Child Protective Services custody. 34-year-old Brittany Sanders of Spring, Texas is behind bars after allegedly shooting a 6-year-old boy while several middle school girls fought near her home. On the night of Thursday, the 2nd of March, Harris County deputies responded to a report of a shooting in the 6100 block of Cypress Green Drive. When deputies arrived, they learned that a 6-year-old boy had been shot in the arm and thigh, and his mother brought him to a local hospital. Upon further investigation, deputies learned that the middle school girls were fighting, and Brittany came out of her home and allegedly fired a warning shot into the air. She then reportedly fired a few shots towards the girl's car as they went back inside the vehicle. As a result, the 6-year-old boy who was inside the car was shot twice. Brittany is believed to be the mother of one of the girls involved in the fight. Brittany was arrested and booked into the Harris County Jail for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Her bond has not yet been set. The investigation into the matter continues. 25-year-old Shemai Hall's behind bars after allegedly stabbing her 5 children, killing 3 of them, and seriously injuring 2 others at their home in Italy, Texas on Friday. At around 4 p.m. on the 3rd of March, deputies responded to the residence at 328 Harris Street on reports of a stabbing. When deputies arrived, they found multiple victims, including 3 children who were dead and 2 others critically wounded. The attack occurred when a caseworker from the Texas Child Protective Services visited the home unannounced after suspecting Shamar was having unsupervised visitations with the children and decided to remove the children from the home. The caseworker called 911 and responding deputies discovered the victims. The children had previously been placed by Child Protective Services under the guardianship of another relative. A 6-year-old boy and 5-year-old twins, a boy and girl, were found dead, while a 4-year-old boy and a 13-month-old girl were seriously wounded and were airlifted to hospital. Shamar was arrested and charged with 3 counts of capital murder and is held at the Wayne McCullum Detention Centre on a $6 million bond. Shamar was previously arrested for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon after being accused of stabbing her sister's boyfriend in 2017. Her twin sister, Troy Shea Hall, was previously arrested for allegedly stabbing a 7-year-old daughter to death in June of 2021. Shamilia Anderson, a relative of the victims, said the children attended the elementary school across the street from their home. They gained their wings, she said. Those were beautiful little babies. A welfare check led investigators to the discovery of a dead person and an unharmed baby at an apartment in Tampa, Florida. At around 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 28th of February, deputies responded to an apartment complex in the 9100 block of Avenue Club Drive to check on the well-being of a resident. When deputies arrived, they entered the apartment unit and found a deceased person. They also found an infant inside the unit who was unharmed. Hillsborough County Child Protective Services worked with the relatives of the baby to ensure the infant was placed in a safe and loving home. On the 3rd of March, the medical examiner's office ruled the death a homicide, and 52-year-old Thomas Sapp was identified as a suspect. Thomas was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder, sexual battery, serious injury, and child neglect. The connection between Thomas and the victims, or how the victim was killed, is unclear. It's also not clear how long the person was deceased for, or how long the infant was alone for. The investigation into the matter continues. Delaware State Police are investigating a homicide in the Felton area. At around 12:30 a.m. on Monday the 27th of February, troopers responded to the intersection of Hopkins Cemetery and Marshy Hope Roads on a report of a body lying in a ditch near a roadway. When troopers arrived at the scene, they found a man suffering from a gunshot wound to his upper body. The victim was taken to an area hospital, where he was pronounced dead. He was identified as 35-year-old Joshua Riley of Houston, Delaware. Upon further investigation, authorities learnt that Joshua's vehicle broke down in the area and he used a nearby resident's phone to call for help. After he returned to his vehicle, a confrontation took place with an unknown party, and he was shot. No suspect information has been provided by police as the investigation into the matter continues. 37-year-old Leroy Matoy of Michigan has been charged in connection with the murder of 1-year-old Justice Starks. Authorities said that on the 29th of November, Leroy was caring for Justice and was a friend's 1-year-old daughter at a Detroit residence when he allegedly assaulted her. Medics were called to the scene and transported the baby to a local hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries on the 1st of December. She was just 1 month away from her 2nd birthday. The Wayne County medical examiner determined the cause of death was from multiple blunt force trauma to the head. On Saturday, the 4th of March, Leroy was arraigned on 1 count of felony murder and 1 count of first-degree child abuse. 51-year-old Mark Murphy and 49-year-old Cherie Glastonbury have been charged with the murder of 55-year-old Jeffrey McLean in Adelaide, Australia, after his dismembered body was found in a willy bin on a Salisbury South paddock in October last year. Andrews farm man had been reported missing several weeks earlier, after he was last seen on the 18th of August. Only his torso was found in the willy bin, with police still trying to locate his head and limbs. Cherie and Jeffrey reportedly lived together and were in a relationship. Mark was believed to be known to the woman. Mark was arrested on Thursday, the 2nd of March. The following day, detectives searched Cherie's house at 21 Lester Grove in Andrews Farm and took her into custody. Police said that around 4:45 a.m. on the 24th of August, CCTV footage from an industrial premises in Salisbury South showed lights in the area and suggested that 2 people were carrying torches or wearing headlamps entered an area where the remains were located. The willy bin and human remains were discovered in October in a vacant lot underneath trees and vegetation in Salisbury South, about 8 miles from where Jeffrey lived. Along with the willy bin and dumped remains, police found 2 shovels, a post hole digger and a gardening fork at the site, with a number of them being in relatively new condition. Authorities said they believe the gardening tools were used by the suspects, who tried to bury Jeffrey's body in the paddock before giving up because the ground was too hard, although disturbed, and dumped it in the wheelie bin instead. Police later confirmed the wheelie bin used had been stolen from a property in Eastview Street at Palmer Lodge, about 900 metres from the scene. Authorities said that Jeffrey had been subject to 4 violent attacks in the months prior to his disappearance. On the 10th of April, he was attacked with acid, and 3 days later Mark struck him in the head with a log splitter, causing serious head injuries. On the 9th of May, his car was set on fire at his home, and on the 10th of May, he had a bucket of acid thrown over him, causing serious burns to his upper back and shoulders. Along with the murder charges, Mark and Shree faced a string of charges for assault, attempted murder, arson and trespass relating to these prior attacks. Authorities said they believe they know why Jeffrey was killed, but did not want to comment on the motive, other than to say it was not drug-related. They both remain held without bail. A 17-year-old boy is in custody in connection with a domestic-related home invasion that left 3 people dead and a 4th person wounded on Sunday night in Bolingbrook, Illinois. At around 8:15 p.m. on the 5th of March, authorities responded to a report of a possible home invasion at 123 Lee Lane. When officers arrived at the residence, they found 4 victims who had been shot. A man and 2 girls were pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities have identified 2 of the 3 people killed as 40-year-old Cartez Daniels and 17-year-old Samaya Shelton Tillman, who is said to have been in a relationship with the suspect. A 3rd victim is yet to be identified by the DuPage County Coroner's Office. A 4th victim, a 34-year-old woman, was listed in a critical condition at the hospital. 2 other juveniles, a 14-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy, were inside the residence at the time of the shooting, and both were unharmed. A woman whose name remains anonymous said her son was playing an online video game with a child inside the home at the time. He heard gunshots and got out, and then he didn't hear his friend anymore. Following the shooting, police quickly identified the suspect. He was found near his residence at around 10 p.m. and was taken into custody. The suspect, who hasn't been named, is believed to have acted alone. Formal charges have yet to be approved by the Will County State Attorney's Office. Police declined to comment on a motive. A 31-year-old woman was arrested for indecent exposure for publicly urinating at the Shami Far Park in Gainesville, Florida on Thursday morning. Officers said that while at the park, Kimberly White took off her clothes and started to urinate. She was arrested by Gainesville police for indecent exposure. A witness told officers that Kimberly urinated twice at the park. Her 2-year-old son was with her at the time. Jail records indicate that she's no longer behind bars. Austin Daniel Hoff was recently sentenced to 23 years in prison for the fatal shooting of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend in 2016. Austin, an auto mechanic in the Austin, Texas area, persuaded his girlfriend to move in with him. She later caught Austin cheating on her, so the two broke up and she moved back to Spring. Austin began to harass and stalk her. On the night of the 5th of September 2016, Austin drove to and parked outside his ex-girlfriend's home, located at 9502 Delaware Street, where he waited for 3 hours for her to return. At around 11:30 p.m, when Austin's ex-girlfriend came home, she was with her new boyfriend, Stephen Center. When they tried to go inside, Austin forced his way in and Stephen pushed him away. The 2 men got involved in a struggle before Austin took out a gun and shot Stephen in the chest. Austin then got into his car, removed his shirt and drove back to Austin. Austin's father called him and convinced him to drive back to Spring. When he returned, Harris County deputies located his shirt and gun inside his vehicle, which were covered in blood. On Tuesday the 28th of February, Austin was convicted of murder and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Austin will be eligible for parole after serving half of his sentence. A 30-year-old man of Mount Olive, Illinois was recently sentenced to 40 years in prison for the 2022 fatal beating of a victim in a wheelchair. At around 4 a.m. on the 7th of August, Blake Streep attacked 25-year-old Michael Ray inside a home at 2205 Miracle Avenue in Granite City, Illinois, and he suffered severe head injuries as a result. Michael was transported to a hospital in St. Louis, where he died just days later. During an interview with detectives, Blake admitted to using meth at the time of the attack, and he was angry after suspecting that Michael, who was blind and used a wheelchair, was pretending to need his wheelchair. Michael's family said that Michael became blind and needed a wheelchair after he was involved in an accident when he was a teenager and was visiting a friend the night he was beaten. They did not know Blake. On Friday the 3rd of March, Michael pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and will spend the next 4 decades behind bars without parole. Madison County State's Attorney Tom Haynes said, "This was a ruthless, unprovoked attack that was fueled by drugs and inflicted upon a victim who was nearly incapable of defending himself. The family and loved ones of Michael have experienced unimaginable suffering, but we hope that the resolution of this case allows them to have some closure." A couple are behind bars after 2 children were allegedly found tied to their beds in a home in Natchitoches, Louisiana last week. At 1:13 p.m. on Friday the 3rd of March, police responded to a call of abuse at a residence in the 900 block of Dixie Street after a concerned citizen visited the home and found 2 children tied to their beds. The citizen then freed the children and called the police. When officers arrived at the property, they arrested 28-year-old Michelle Benjamin and 39-year-old James Grant. They've been charged with 2 counts of cruelty to a juvenile, 2 counts of domestic abuse battery with child endangerment, and 2 counts of false imprisonment. Benjamin and Grant are held at the Natchitoches Parish Detention Centre. Authorities said they did not know what the relationship between the couple and the children were. The children have been placed into the care of the Department of Children and Family Services. The Delaware County Sheriff's Office in Texas is investigating a road rage incident that led to the fatal shooting of a young woman on Sunday morning. At around 3 a.m. on the 5th of March, San Juan police arrived at the intersection of South Veterans Boulevard and West Hall Acres Road, where they found Yoselin Rodriguez in a wrecked car, deceased with a gunshot wound. Witnesses told investigators that Yoselin was leaving a party when an argument occurred with a group of men who were driving a dark-coloured newer model lifted Dodge Ram truck. The driver of the Dodge truck pulled up next to Yoselin's vehicle, and an unknown man shot into the vehicle, striking Yoselin. Authorities do not have any suspects in custody and are continuing to investigate the matter. Police are urging anyone with information in the case to contact Crime Stoppers.